Hi, everyone, and welcome to this little webinar on how to get started with Microsoft Teams. Today, I'm going to show you how we use Team at Logient and a couple of tips and tricks on this amazing collaboration tool. Let's start with the good news. If you currently use Office 365, you already have access to Microsoft Teams. If not, well, Microsoft has made a standalone version available for the general public. Sure, this free version will not have all the perks of the full version that comes with O365. However, if you take a look with me on the column on the left, you'll see that you have access to most of the functionalities required for video conferencing, screen sharing, and even file storage. So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is Microsoft Teams? Well, first off, it's more than a simple collaboration tool. It's in fact a veritable hub for teamwork. So even though the number of Teams user has grown from 13 million to more than 45 million in less than 2 months, Microsoft Teams is in fact the evolution of Messenger, Office Communicator, and Skype for Business. We're talking about well over 2 decades of product evolution and improvement. I mean, sure, it's true. Teams is not the prettiest or most user-friendly solution out there when it comes to video conferencing and screen sharing. And yes, there's hundreds of other tools, some of them free, that do a better job when it comes to these capabilities. However, in today's context where remote work might become the norm rather than the exception, it's nice to know that the data information that we'll be sharing on Teams will be encrypted and stored in Microsoft's data centers and will never be shared with anyone. But I digress. Why Teams? Well, beyond the screen sharing capabilities, Teams allows us to easily collaborate with our clients, partners, and colleagues. Not only that, Teams is also an integral part, almost the glue between all of Microsoft's solutions and apps. Furthermore, it plays really well with others. As of today, Team plugins are available for well over 450 business applications. There's so many possibilities. I can spend an hour talking about these alone, but since we don't really have the time, here's what we'll cover today. We're going to take a look at Teams interface. We're going to create a team and a channel together. We're also going to create an online meeting. And finally, I'm going to show you a couple of teleconference and screen sharing tips. On this note, let us go. Let me start by propping up my Teams interface here. Let's start with what is commonly called in Microsoft jargon, the current navigation on the left-hand side. In reality, within Teams, this is just a button bar that can be customizable. Meaning you can actually take these buttons and drag them and drop them anywhere you'd like. And you can also add other buttons to it. For example, I like to add the help button, which provides me with help on Microsoft Teams. If not, I could switch it out for another button, which would be stream, which is where all our videos are recorded that take place within Teams. But since you don't want really to replace, if you want extra buttons, all you have to do is select one, add it, and then if you really like it, just simply pin it to the bar. So as you can see, I can slowly but surely start populating this bar with all my favorite apps. But let's take a look at the default buttons and what they do. So right at the top, you have the conversation button, or actually, if you have it by default, it would be the activity/flux button. Well, when you click on this, it shows you all of the activities that regards you that took place in Teams. So to be honest, I don't really like this guy. I think it's too much information that I don't really, that doesn't really add any value to me. So what I usually do is I simply hide it from my button bar. Conversation is where you have the history of all your conversations that took place in Teams. And I'm talking about either conversations with colleagues, groups of colleagues, or even conversations that took place within meetings. I'm going to move on now to the Teams tab, which shows me the teams to which I belong to and not all of the teams within my corporation. So as you can see, I'm part of the social committee and part of the operations team. Once again, this is very flexible in terms of if you belong to several teams, you can simply move them in the order you would like. Also, just a little note on team, every team that is created comes by default with a general channel, which is where most of the general conversations take place, as well as other channels that are created by the team members themselves. A common way to define a channel would be either a project or a client. At Logian, it's really simple. We use our teams for our internal teams, meaning either accounting, developers, marketing, sales, and we use the channels as either projects for development teams or as clients when it comes to sales, right? So, but anyone can use these tools the way they want, right? For example, a hospital would have their teams, would be the different departments like the ER department, ICU, and the channels could be the teams within these departments. Let's move on to calendar. I don't really use this one because personally, I'm someone who prefers to take care of my communications and meetings in Outlook. Teams allows me to do that. I can actually create team meetings in Outlook, and my calendar in Teams is actually a carbon copy of whatever is in my calendar in Outlook, meaning they're both updated at the same time. The call button allows me to quickly make a call with a person inside or outside my organization, right? So let me just enter a name of a person in my company, for example, Vince. If I click on Vince, as you can see, I have my options of communicating with this person either by instant messaging within Teams. I could compose an email to them. I could see their place in the organizational chart. And I could either start a video or audio meeting with this individual by simply clicking on one of the icons in their card. Files. Now, this is a really nice one because it shows me all the files that I've uploaded to Microsoft Teams, as well as all the files I've downloaded from Microsoft Teams. Also, a fun little perk here is you also have access to your OneDrive, meaning you don't need to launch a Windows folder to take a look at it. You just take a look at your OneDrive from Teams itself. Another application you don't really need to manage on the side. So let's now move on to the upper right-hand side of my screen where there's a picture of my face. If I actually click on this, it will give me access to some configuration options, meaning I could change the image that represents me. I can also define my status, meaning available, busy, or do not disturb. And I can also define my interface settings, meaning if I want to change the look and feel of Microsoft Teams, I could just do it at a click of a button. To be honest, I like the default one. I find it clean and it does the job. And finally, for you power users who enjoy shortcuts as much as I do, there's a little drop-down menu option here that you can click, and you will have access to all of the shortcuts available within Microsoft Teams. And there's a lot. And I really like shortcuts. Sorry, I'm going to curb my enthusiasm now. Okay, the last thing I want to say about the interface is two things, actually. First off, I don't really spend time in using these buttons, to be honest, because I could get 97% of things I want to do directly from this action bar at the top, meaning I could quickly start a conversation with a colleague by simply typing their name. Also, I could take a look at all the applications that are available on Teams, like, for example, Poly. This literally is more than a search bar. It's a command bar, right? So another kind of almost hidden feature that people don't really notice is this little icon over here. Well, this lets me quickly start a conversation with a group of people or a single person. All I have to do is click on this little icon, enter the name of the people I want to talk to. For example, let's make a group of 3 individuals. Now, if I communicate with these individuals a lot, what I can do is create a group with them, meaning I simply have to click the little chevron here, enter a name for this group of people. Let's call it the Poker Club. Now, as soon as I start a conversation with these people, as you can see, they have become a group. I get a quick overview of who the group members are. And if I want, I could quickly start either a video conversation, audio, or screening session with these three people at the click of a button. Let's move on now to how to create a team within Teams. So usually for smaller organizations, people can simply create a team by clicking on the button located at the bottom of the screen over here. However, for bigger corporations like Legion, where there's over 150 employees, we don't really want people to be able to create teams on the fly. Otherwise, we'll end up with way too many teams and way too much noise. So what we usually have to do at Legion, if we don't have admin rights, is to go through a request process. And if approved, the Teams administrator will be able to create a team by using the admin center. And we're going to do so right now. So I'm right now within the Microsoft Teams admin center, and I'm just going to create a team called developers, to which we're going to add 2 individuals. So let me dismiss this little reminder here. I just have to, from the Teams menu, click the Add button, enter a name of my team, click the Create button at the bottom, and as soon as I get my confirmation that my team has been created, well, you're going to see the result directly into Teams. So let me open Teams right back again. As you can see, my developers team has been added. And like I was telling you before, by default, it comes with a general channel where people can start conversating. Now, I'd only be talking to myself since there's nobody in this team. So since I have admin rights, I am able to actually add other users to this team, which I'll do so right now. So I'm going to click the Add button. I'm going to add a couple of individuals to this team. Once I click Add, it's going to allow me to deem one of these members as either a simple member or an owner. If a team member is deemed an owner, well, they can also add members to this team. So for this exercise, we'll just leave everyone as a team member. I can click the Close button. And now, like I was saying before, we have our team that's created. So let's say these projects are affected to a client called Acme, to which they are working for, right? So they're developers and we're working for a client called Acme. So let me create a channel for this client. To do so, I simply click the ellipsis button and I will add a channel to this team. So let's call it like our client, Acme, and click Add. Once my channel has been added, I can start adding a lot of information to it by using what you see at the top of the screen, which is called the tab bar. So this allows me to centralize all the information for that client, so I don't need to open several applications to be able to work on the same project. Let me show you what I mean. For example, for this client, our developer used a dashboard, which is found in an application called Confluence by Atlassian. So instead of having Confluence open on my desk, I'm simply going to add a link to this application directly in Teams by clicking the little plus sign. Since Confluence is a web app, I am going to simply choose the website option, enter the URL, enter a name that is telling for this tab. So let's just call it dashboard. I click save. And as soon as my dashboard is added, as you can see, I can now play around in Confluence within Teams, meaning I can do exactly the same thing I would do if I were using the application itself. I can modify a page, I could add pages, I can also go through all the other sections of Confluence within Teams. And to show you that I'm just not saying anything, so if you take a look, this is actually Confluence's actual interface. As you can see, I'm using one tool to work in it. Now, if you see that there's too many tabs here and some of them you don't use, you can simply right-click on them and remove them by doing so. If you take a look, for example, I don't really want the wiki, so I'm just going to delete this and I never have to see it again. Now, there's another tab that's fun is you can also centralize all the files that have to do with this client within this channel. And what's interesting here that you didn't see is, let me first of all upload a document to this channel. Sorry about that. Let me pop Teams right back up. And I'm going to simply add a document by dragging and dropping it within Teams. I get my confirmation message. Now, what happened when I created my, my developer teams is in the background, there was also a SharePoint site that was created for this team. And I will show it to you right now. So as you can see, this is my SharePoint site. And since I'm sharing a document, what SharePoint did was as soon as I dropped the document in Teams, it created a document library for this client. So as soon as a document is available in Teams, people can start collaborating on it, meaning that they can modify this document either inside the browser, because there's in Office 365, you get access to a web browser version of Word, which has about 90% of all the capabilities of the full desktop client. I'm actually going to open it in the full desktop client. And I'm going to start playing around with this document. So let's say I just add a line at the top. As you can see, my little save icon here has also a little refresh thing. That means that everything I'm adding to this document is currently being saved on SharePoint, on my OneDrive, and on Teams itself. So let me just close the document. I don't need to save it. Let me go back now into Microsoft Teams so I can just close my SharePoint site altogether. I'm back in Teams, and let's now open this in the Word Online, which is the browser app of Microsoft Word. So as you can see, the line I've added before has been added. I can add another line. So just to tell you, if other people were to open this document at the same time as me, we could all collaborate at the same time on it, right? And I would actually, whenever I click refresh, I would see what these people have been doing on it. So I've added another line. Let me once again just close this document altogether. And finally, what I want to show you is I can actually open this document directly in Microsoft Teams. And you can see my changes are made. And this is where it gets really interesting is you can actually start a conversation on this document with the people that are part of this group. And once again, all the changes you're making are always saved in real time. So let us close this document because we don't need it anymore. And finally, the last thing I want to show you guys when it comes to Teams is if you belong to several teams, I showed you before that you could actually drag them and drop them in any order you want. However, if you belong to several teams and these teams have several channels to which you want to keep an eye on easily, well, you can always pin your channels at the top of the screen by clicking the ellipsis button and clicking the pin button. So I'm going to do that with my favorite channels from the 3 teams I belong to. And as you can see, as soon as I click on pin, these will be displayed at the top of my page, and I can still drag them and drop them somewhere else if I want to. So I hope that this covers the Teams option. Let's move on now to how to create a meeting. Like I said before, you can create your Teams meeting directly from Microsoft Teams, right? But I'm somebody who prefers to keep things separate when it comes to that. So let me just close this, and I'm going to open my Outlook. So 2 ways to create a meeting from Outlook. You could either use the new item button from the ribbon and select Teams Meeting. So what happens here when you go through this route is your meetings window will open where you can create a meeting. However, the only problem is that whenever you create a meeting from your inbox, Outlook only takes the next available window that you have and directly populates this field with it, right? So it's an extra step that I don't really like. So let me do this another way for you. I'm just going to close this right now. I don't want to see my changes. So let's just create the meeting the way I usually do it, which is from my calendar, right? So let's create a Teams meeting from my Outlook calendar, for example, tomorrow at 2. So I just simply click on my calendar to where I want my meeting to take place. In the ribbon, as you can see, there's this option called New Teams Meeting. I'm going to click it. So right now, my meeting is at the right time on the right day. I'm just going to enter a title for it. I'm going to add a required individual. And finally, here's where it gets interesting. So you have a link to your meeting in your inbox, in the body of your meeting message that's going to be sent to your participants. Now, when they click on this link, they'll have the choice of either opening the Teams application or a web version of Microsoft Teams. If they open the web version, it's a one-time thing. They'll be able to participate to your meeting and use all of Teams capabilities. And once they leave the meeting, the browser window will be closed and there's no trace left of it on their computer. Now, that being said, as a presenter, it's always nice to be able to configure your meeting options. So for this purpose, there's this little link right here underneath the link to your actual meeting that allows you to configure your meeting options. So you just control click on this little link, and what happens is a web browser window will be opened, and here you can configure the following two options. So who can bypass the lobby? And, oops, sorry about that. Who can bypass the lobby? And as I was saying, let me go back to my little Teams meeting here. Pings, there we go. And who can present? So in terms of bypassing the lobby, I usually am friendly with the people in my company. And when it comes to who can present, well, for this, I'm a bit more picky, right? When I'm presenting to more than 3 people, I don't really want everybody to be able to become a presenter necessarily. So what I do is I can configure either specific people or only me can be a presenter. Once I've selected my options, I simply click on the save button. And once I see the done check mark, I can just close this and my meeting has been configured. So let's go back to our Teams meeting. The fact that my link is now has been used means my meeting options have been saved. I have all the information I need. Let me click send. Close my proof checker, and here we go. My meeting has been sent. Let's go in our Teams calendar. If I do a little refresh, as you can see, my meeting has now been added to not only my Teams calendar, but obviously it was also added to my Microsoft Outlook calendar at the same time. So finally, one last thing. Let's go now to some teleconferencing tips and tricks that I enjoy. So let me just bring up the screen of this actual teleconference. So your best friend when it comes to your meetings online is this little action bar that you have at the center of your screen, right? It allows you to do full of little things. For example, if you're using your camera and you're somewhere where it's really noisy in the background, well, I can click the 3 buttons here and I actually could blur my background. So let me go back to being younger man. Also, there's another thing that is really fun over here is if you are using Microsoft Teams and you want to record your meetings, these can be made available later on Microsoft's streaming website called Stream. So what happens when I record a meeting is that once the meeting is done, these guys are recorded and made available on Microsoft Stream, which then they can be easily edited and trimmed or shared with other people that were part of the meeting. For example, they could share this either through Yammer or via email, or even you can send a link that will allow someone to embed this video within a website, right? It's compiling right now, and there we go. Your video would be embedded inside your website. So and you can configure the autoplay options and if it's responsive, etc. So full of possibilities, meaning that your meetings can quickly become training sessions that you can then make available to your staff. Let's go back to the actual presentation bar now. As you can see, if you click on this button, you can see the conversation of this meeting. So if you have several people that are participating, and for example, there's a hot topic that came up and you want to quickly feel out your audience, right? You could on the fly use this conversation window as much more than just for speaking. You can actually have access to applications like Poly, which is little application I love that allows me to make surveys on the fly. So let me just create one really fast. So do you? I'll enter my first choice, yes or no, simplicity itself. All the other fields are optional. I click preview to take a look at what it will look like. I can then either send it directly or submit my vote and then send the invitation to everyone to participate. We'll wait a little bit. After a couple of seconds, you will see my survey app has popped up and everyone that's in the meeting room can now answer the question. Another thing I'd like to show you guys is, as you can see, I was using a presentation tool. Well, Teams is pretty permissive in the sense that I'm not using a presentation tool that's within Teams. I'm actually using a little tool, allow me to show you this, called Zoomit, right? So let me just X this out. So I'm actually using Zoomit, which is an external tool, and Teams is permissive enough to actually let me use this tool on top of its interface and allow my participants to see all the actions I'm doing on screen. That pretty much takes care of this little webinar on Microsoft Teams, and we hope to keep in touch.